True Crime Talk is brought to you by the great folks over at Wild Blue Press. If you're looking for great true crime authors, great true crime books, that's where you need to go. wildbluepress.com. Check out their books, check out their authors. Consider picking up a book from yours truly, The Delphi Murders, The Quest to Find the Man on the Bridge by Nick Edwards. Tonight on True Crime Talk, I am joined by my good friend, Bill Huffman. He is the creator and host of the Who Killed podcast. You've heard me on as a guest. You've heard him on Off the Record on True Crime Garage. Well, Bill and I are talking about the recent developments and the big break that took place very recently in the yogurt shop murders case. After more than 30 years, Austin PD finally got their man.
The Austin Yogurt Shop murders. You and I talked about this case about 4 or 5 years ago. We talked about Beverly Lowry's book, Who Killed These Girls, which is an incredible read. Highly recommend it. And so, Nick, what were your thoughts when first there was, kind of like a rumor that there was a break in the case, and then two, the fact that this guy that they named, Robert Eugene Brashers, is a serial killer? And a bad dude.
Yeah, so, monster is the word that comes to mind when we think of Brashers, Robert Eugene Brashers, and the series of rapes and homicides that he committed during his time on this earth. Thankfully, he's no longer around. Shout out to the captain, because he's the one that sent me the information. He was the first one that I heard this from. I had been a little bit out of town, about an hour and a half south of where I live, and for the day, and traveled back that night. And when I got home, checking my phone, I was really surprised, because before I get into this, Bill, I do want to expand on something you said. Who Killed These Girls by Beverly Lowry, Cold Case, The Yogurt Shop Murders, the book that Bill just mentioned. Bill and I both huge fans of that book. It's an incredible book, like Bill was saying. I believe it to be one of the top 5 or 6 true crime books that I've ever consumed.
With all the detail and with the way that it's written, it is absolutely, it's incredible. It is.
The research that Beverly Lowry put into the book, and then the way that she chose to lay it out, was really fantastic. And it really chronicled a case that I think you and I shared these concerns, especially when we had our conversation about the FBI and the YSTR DNA evidence in this case, that it chronicled a case that needed to be recorded, written, and told in this way, because I was getting concerned that this case would never be solved. And the complexities with this case, anybody that knows the case, I think they will agree with me saying that you can see the hurdles that would need to be cleared to solve this case, to get where we are today. And I'm so thankful that Beverly Lowry put this book together, because it's great. They made the documentary, HBO did, which centered around portions of the book. But don't watch the documentary and think that you're getting a full, complete understanding of her book.
Getting a snippet of what she really put into that. I totally agree. Top 10 true crime book of all time. Just great.
Another good one, too, is Murdered Innocence by Corey Mitchell. It's a lesser-known book about this case, and actually it was written years prior to Who Killed These Girls. So the information in it is quite different. Corey Mitchell, in his book, hones in on the criminals from Mexico that were investigated, and really one part of the story that I think gets lost is that the criminals from Mexico, so they came up here and they committed some crimes. One of the crimes was an abduction and rape, and then they fled back to Mexico. And there were some similarities in the case, and I think that one of the perpetrators of those crimes, he looked very much like one of the composite sketches that came out in the yogurt shop case. And so they took a hard look at these guys and really they did to those Mexican guys what they did to the 4 boys, 2 which were eventually tried and convicted here in the States, the Texas kids.
Right.
And maybe even on a more brutality type of level, because the reason why they never prosecuted these men from Mexico is the Mexican authorities wanted to try them there. And APD has done a lot of good things in this case and done some bad things in the case. Let's not sugarcoat it, right? Let's not just glaze over it.
It's part of what happens when a case of this magnitude hits a small town, and
this case took over that city.
4 murders of 4 young girls. I mean, we've talked about, obviously, the Mihalovic case. That's 1 girl in 1 town, and that took over the town. So just imagine the overwhelming amount of sadness and just feelings of despair, because they didn't know who did it. There's a monster running around.
And with these men from Mexico, APD never charged them because Mexico wanted to charge them, but then APD wouldn't let them because they go down there and they're talking to these guys, and you want to talk about, we've seen some of the confessions in this case from Michael Scott and from Robert Springsteen, and we can get into those guys a little bit more as we get into this case more, but these guys in Mexico got much more wrong in their air quotes confessions that were essentially beat out of them to the point they didn't even know how many victims there were. They thought there were 3 victims. I mean, that's a big red flag when your so-called perpetrators can't even come up with the right number of victims. And the Mexican authorities wanted APD to hand over everything they had on the case to them. And one thing that APD, Austin Police Department, did really well on this case, as desperate as they were to get this solved immediately and to find the persons who did this, the monsters who did this, and hold them accountable and show their faces to the public and say, look, we got them. This ain't going to happen again. This is what happens when you do this in our town. We get you. But the one thing they did that was very smart was they said, you know what? We don't like these confessions we're hearing from the Mexican authorities, and we're afraid if we give them what we got, because they had, I believe, 13 pieces of holdback information that all got leaked out over the years. So they didn't. The information was good. They weren't so good at holding it back. Yeah,
that's it happens in a case that goes cold for as long as it did, and you're going to have leaks, and one of the reasons I'm sure they didn't want to give that information to the Mexican authorities is because they were going to just use it to railroad these guys.
They were going to supply it to these guys, right? They were going to put that information into their confessions.
Yep.
And APD was smart enough to recognize that and avoid that situation. Now,
no American police department would ever do something.
Well, in fact, the very same police department did the exact same thing, where several years later, we have some other detectives who really were, I don't know how much they were feeding information to Michael Scott and to Robert Springsteen, but they certainly were, what'd you tie them up with? Rope? No, that's not it. Come on, think harder. It was never giving them the answers. It was always telling them they're wrong and making them think harder. Think harder. Come on, try to remember. We know you're trying to remember. And they would say, nope, 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 until they got the answer right.
Yeah. You look at those, the fact that they were actually convicted with this information, clearly they were coached, and they didn't even have the ability to charge the other 2 of the 4 that they wanted to charge. And then let's talk about the fact that it gets overturned or whatever, and the DA still wants to try him again. Like, they still want to do it. They still want to find out who it is. And it's just like, this went on for a decade. I mean, could you imagine being in that jackpot for 10 plus years where you are locked up for a number of those years, but just because of what you said, or how that works, kind of tricked into saying. But yeah, it's a total miscarriage of justice. That one, I think, really gets missed over, glossed over as far as now that we've caught the bad guy, everybody kind of forgets about the people that paid the price along the way.
Yeah, it's and that's one thing that I'm curious about now here, Bill, because when the two men got released, when Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott got released, it was said that they could not pursue a lawsuit against the state for wrongful conviction, being locked up in prison, because the charges were essentially dropped, right? They found flaws in the trials and legal flaws. So they had to grant them appeals or a new trial. And then the prosecution decided, well, we're going to drop the charges against them. Because they were not exonerated, they were not able to pursue a lawsuit. Now, though, I'm curious, they're still not exonerated, technically. However, you have the investigating agency saying Robert Eugene Brashers, dead serial killer, is solely responsible for these 4 murders. So it seems like to me that now, if they didn't have a case before, now they would.
Yeah, I definitely think that they have some grounds to stand on for sure. When we talk about this case, I mean, we didn't really talk about this at the beginning because we just kind of assume people are familiar with the case itself. But some of the facts about this case, it was 4 young girls. This happened in Austin. This was not, some major city at the time. And if anybody who's watched that HBO documentary will know that Austin has grown throughout the years. And, this was 2 girls who were working and their friends, a sister and a friend. And I just can't even imagine what those families were thinking for all these years, for decades. I mean, we're talking about one individual. What in the hell? Not to dance around on it, but what was this guy doing? I mean, this guy's one bad dude. I mean, I hate to be so blunt about it, but I mean, he freaking killed so many people.
Yeah.
I mean,
these murders
and got away with it, technically got away with it because he killed himself. But these murders, go ahead.
And so, just to add a little more detail for those maybe that
I just glossed over it,
hearing about this case for the first time, or only hearing about it more recently because of the new information that came out. But sure. Jennifer Harbison, Eliza Thomas, they were both 17 years old. They worked at I can't believe it's yogurt shop on West Anderson Lane in Austin, Texas. Now, I can't remember which of the 2 worked there first, but these 2 were friends. They were good friends, and one of them told the other one, hey, you should come get a job at this yogurt shop with me. It's easy, it's fun, and we can work together. You know how it is when you're a teenager, and you want to go work with your buddies because you're hanging out and you get to make a little bit of cash, get a little bit of work experience all at the same time. Yeah,
we all get to work at the city or at the pool as lifeguards. That was, yeah, absolutely.
And they're getting to work at this great shop. It was owned by a regional business there. They owned several of these yogurt shops.
They had a good decent sized chain, didn't they?
Yeah, I can't remember how many shops. It was a brother and sister.
There were a bunch of these in the early 90s because I remember in Ohio we had TCBY, which this cannot be yogurt or so. What, I don't even remember, but it was TCBY. But it was all these different mom and pop. It was before Blockbuster and Hollywood Video took over, when there were mom and pop, ice cream places. And yeah, dude,
that's funny that you say that, because when we first covered it on True Crime Garage, now this would have been 2017, I think. I kept screwing up the name of I can't believe it's yogurt, because like you said, in Ohio, we had two different frozen yogurt chains, and they had similar names to this, but they were slightly different. And I kept jumbling up the different names altogether. But yeah, you were right. It was like, this is ICBY, and we had TC something.
I know that Rocky River had TCBY, and I still don't even, this cannot be yogurt. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I remember it was just the biggest fad or whatever. It was such a hit at that time that these places popped up all over the country.
Well, and it was great too, because you could go in with just a few bucks, right? Mm-hmm. We would go there as kids, ride our bikes up to the store, because you could go in there with $3 or $4 and get something, right? You didn't have to have a whole lot of money to go in there. And I think there was some kind of frozen yogurt sandwich, like an ice cream sandwich that they had that was amazing. It was between two chocolate chip cookies, and it was incredible. And that was the thing that I got all the time. And then there would always be some jerk kid that would be up there trying to sample as many flavors as they can for free,
and getting all the different toppings. We're waxing nostalgic about our frozen yogurt days and the rise of frozen yogurt.
So these two good friends, both 17 years old, they're working together at this yogurt shop. And in fact, one of them was supposed to have the night off every time, right? Every time we cover one of these stories where it's at the Burger Chef, or it's at the Brown's Chicken, or the Kentucky Fried Chicken. We did a Kentucky Fried Chicken murders case in Texas that took place in Texas as well. I think it was 1983, going off of memory. But there's always that story of somebody that called off, or they got sick and didn't go in, so their life was spared in some weird roundabout way. And then there's somebody that was not supposed to work but covered for somebody and ends up being a victim. Here, it's similar, where the manager or the assistant manager, it was her regular night, and she had the night off for some previous engagement, and one of these 17-year-old girls covered for her that night. So we have the two friends, Eliza and Jennifer, working together that night. And as you said, Jennifer's younger sister, Sarah, who was 15, and her friend Amy Ayers, who is 13, they show up at the shop that night. And it was they show up at the shop because they're going to catch a ride home with Jennifer, and Amy Ayers is going to stay the night at the Harbison house. And so the two younger victims are only there to get this ride. And based off of Beverly Lowry's book, it's believed that the two younger girls would have just hung out in the back area. So you have a front of the house and a back of the house.
Yep.
Hang out in the back, and probably would have helped them with the closing duties to speed things up so everybody can get out of there faster than normal. Now, the shop closes at 11 p.m. Let's fast forward 42 minutes later. And between the two books and between the docu-series that recently came out and some of the episodes about this case on 48 Hours, this number varies by only a few minutes. But I'm going to go with 42 minutes because that's the one I've seen most reported. That's when a call goes into emergency services that somebody, it was an officer that was on patrol, spotted a fire. Now, he was very new to the force, and he actually gave out an address that was incorrect. And so they're responding to this fire. They're a little bit delayed because they have the incorrect address. But when you're showing up to a place that sells food, these guys are anticipating that it's their run-of-the-mill
grease fire.
Yeah, midnight grease fire. Somebody left a stove top on or left something on. It caught fire after everybody left, and we're just going to go here, hose it down, and we'll be in and out. And that's not the case. When they get there, they find the front door of the business locked. They find the back door to the business, which leads into an alleyway. So they're in like a plaza, strip mall type setup where there's shops that are next door to them as well. And so the alley runs behind all of these different shops, and they're putting out the fire. They're going in there, knocking it down, I think is how the the firefighters referred to it on 48 Hours and in Beverly Lowry's book, knocking it down, and when one of them sees a foot, and then they decide, keep in mind that, they're powerful hoses, fire hoses, putting out this fire, trying to extinguish the flames. So they are unaware that they're destroying evidence as they are attempting to put out the fire. So I hate no fault of theirs at all. And I hate to give kudos to the killer here, but he clearly set the fire as an attempt to destroy that evidence. And they're knocking down the fire, and one of the firefighters says to the other one, like, there's something very wrong here. Like, gets this feeling right away that there's something very wrong here. We need to stop what we're doing. We need to get out of here, and we need to call police and get police here with us. And the case was a little mishandled from the beginning. There was some potential evidence that went missing. But again, it's also the call that nobody ever expects that they're going to get. There are people that serve and protect in their areas for 20, 30 years of their life, and they never thank God they never get a call like this. This is to go through Detective Jones's, he's the only homicide robbery detective on that night. So he gets the call. He catches this case, as they call it. And when he's phoning it in back to headquarters, it's terrifying. It's horrific to hear him having to phone this in. He's saying arson. I think he says 3 homicides. Yeah, suspected sexual assault, suspected gun murders, and then while he's trying to phone it, somebody finds the 4th body.
Yeah, I was going to say, because they originally thought it was just 3 bodies, and the 4th body, I think they were they stacked on top of one another, or something like that, or was
yes. 2 of the girls were lying sort of next to one another.
Okay.
And all 4 of them had been shot in the head. 3 of them shot with a 20. All 4 of them shot with a 22, and Amy Ayers was also shot with a 380. And 2 of the girls were lying next to one another, and I believe it was Sarah Harbinson who, the way that they describe it, I understand why they describe it this way, but I don't understand. The description doesn't provide me with much of insight of how she would have been lying there, but she is essentially on top of one of those 2 girls that are next to each other. And Gotcha. They describe it as she was left in an unnatural way. So they believe that the perpetrator must have tried to drag her or toss her on top of where she was found. So unlike the other 2, where they suspect they were laying where they were killed. And so Sarah's found in this unnatural way, as it's described. And then Amy Ayers is a little bit away from the other girls. In some tellings of this story, it makes it sound like she's found very far from the other 3. She's found much closer than how it's described. She was found like 4 or 5 feet from the other girls. And if you look at a diagram, which there's plenty of them online, of the yogurt shop itself, it's got like a floor plan, and then you can see where the 4 bodies are. And even in that depiction, it looks a little further away than what she actually was. But the case is, it was a true whodunit, and it's one of those types of cases that you can look at, and there's a lot of different information out there, and some of it very good information. But because you had so many people coming and going in that store, in that shop that night, you have a lot of witnesses, not to the crime, but you have witnesses to tell us what was going on when they entered the store, when they got their frozen treat. Some people staying there and eating it there, some people going home. And they did a really good job with tracking down, using the receipts for the sales to track down customers for that night and try to figure out what happened. And then you had the speculation of, Well, how did the killer or killers get into the shop? Was the shop already closed and they managed to get in through the back door? Were they potentially already in the shop? That was one theory that we weren't the first to present it, but we did present that theory on True Crime Garage, and that one seemed to have some legs for a while. Now, with the new information that's coming out, I think we're back to square one on how he was able to access the shop. That was part that we didn't get in the press conference that was held on Monday of this week by the Austin PD.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, okay, so like similarities obviously to lots of different cases, but the idea that he would be in there waiting, somehow get in the back door, makes you wonder, was he in there earlier that night? Or was he the last customer and then had them lock the door under duress? Or but that doesn't make sense much either, because some of the chairs were put up, weren't there?
Yeah, so all of the chairs were put up except for two of them, and then they would move the napkin container as well. So you're resetting all the tables, and part of the closing duties was to stack the chairs onto the tables, and then you mop the floor.
Yeah.
And when they found the shop after the murders took place, again, keep in mind, closes at 11, the fire's called in at 11:42. So all of the horrible, terrible shit that happened inside of that store happened very quickly.
Yeah.
Happened between 11 and 11:42, and you could probably shave about 5 minutes off of that, because that's when people were seeing the smoke coming from. I would guess, easily by 11:42 that the perpetrator had. I would say not only successfully set the fire, he was already gone.
He was gone my guess is he was gone soon after he set the fire, for obvious reasons. But the idea that I think that does make the idea that he did come in through the back door much more realistic and much more of a possibility, which makes me wonder if he had been casing out the joint, because if you look at his timeline of crimes, this would have been pretty early on in his it would have been like, he got convicted of attempted murder, got sentenced to 12 years, but only did 3. He got out in 89 and then committed these murders in 91. So if he would have just served a sentence, this case would have never have happened. Right. But yeah, you look at his MO and the way that he was a vicious, sadistic killer, obviously a sexual deviant as well. he is, once they got his DNA, they connected him to all sorts of stuff. But to think that he would take on 4 girls, it makes you wonder, was he by himself? Or did he have an accomplice?
Well,
but if you have a gun, you can control 4 people. It's not that hard.
So the captain and I did an episode on this after this good news came out, and we squabbled a little bit on our episode because I have a hard time with some of the information in this case, and the way that it's been handled over the years makes me call a lot of things into question. I don't question that this Robert Eugene Brashers is responsible. I question, was he alone or not?
Yes.
And the reason I question that, and look, when I'm wrong, I say I'm wrong. Even though I squabbled with the captain a little bit, I want to make clear here, the captain's not wrong in his opinion and his view of this information. He's not wrong. Everything he said was right. Everything he said is what Austin PD is telling us today. But where my pushback was okay, well, up until 48 hours, 72 hours ago, the information that we were getting was different. Why is that? I don't want just this explanation of who did it. I want an explanation of why has the evidence or I shouldn't say evidence changed. It shouldn't be called evidence. The proper term would be information, the information that was out there. Because since 2000, I believe it was 2011, it was put out that they had 2 DNA profiles, unidentified DNA profiles, 2 of them.
Yes.
And so that tells us that, I've avoided saying this as much as I can. I'm not going to go into the details of it because they're very graphic about this information. If you dig deep enough, you can find it. But it's all... They know for a fact that 3 of the 4 girls were raped. It's presumed all 4 of them were. One of the girls was charred so badly from the fire that it was difficult to tell what had been done prior to the fire. Now...
leads you to believe she was probably set on fire first to hide that evidence.
Well, yeah. So at the very least, she was closest to the fire. She was closest to the heat. Mm-hmm. And the fire was really burning it. So people that don't know this case, don't picture the entire store, the entire building inflamed. It's a portion of the store. The back portion, it was almost like a corner, like a wall. And when I said that they kind of screwed some of this shit up from the beginning, well, I believe the fire started on the storage shelves there, and those storage, and the reason being, and we went through this in great detail on True Crime Garage and our most recent coverage that came out, not our most recent coverage, our coverage that came out after the docuseries came out, because the docuseries on HBO, they did a great job with it, but it's a lot about the victims and a lot about the victims' families, and not so much about the investigation or the evidence or the case itself.
Right.
And one thing that I wanted our audience to be aware of was where the fire started, and we can prove on some just scientific facts where the fire started. That shelving unit was made of stainless steel, which it melts at a much higher temperature than a lot of the other burned items in that back portion of the store. Mm-hmm. So that's an indicator to us that shelving unit was closest to the fire before it was extinguished. And therefore, I believe that the fire was set either right by the shelf and it eventually caught on fire itself, because that shelving unit, Bill, was filled with like
paper products,
paper cups, napkins, a lot of paper products that boom, just go up in flames.
It's a tinderbox.
Yes. And again, here's where I have a problem with the current information. The DNA matches this Robert Eugene Brashers. That's not in question. No. I believe that the APD wouldn't tell us that if that weren't the case. That's 100%.
And his MO lines up.
Exactly. His MO, and let's circle back around to that, because we were talking about that, and you know how I get way out in the middle of nowhere. I get in the weeds, Bill.
Never
in the weeds.
Never.
But the DNA before was telling us 2 people, 2 profiles. And the reason why I have an issue with that is what happened. What happened
to the other profile?
People that know this case very well know that information came from the defense. So we should probably talk briefly about Robert Burns Springsteen and Michael James Scott. To the Office fans out there and fans of The Boss, but these people are nothing to do with either of those. This is a real-life Michael James Scott. Robert Burns Springsteen and Michael James Scott, they went to trial. They were convicted. They originally were going to charge 2 of their friends, which is weird because Maurice Pierce was one of those friends, and Forrest
Wellborn.
Thank you. Those 2 men were what led them to Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen, but they never charged or did drop the charges against Maurice Pierce and Forrest Wellborn, because Forrest Wellborn, I don't think they ever even charged him. Maurice Pierce, I believe they charged him and then dropped the charges and decided not to go to trial. And in both of those guys, they're like, we don't have enough evidence to take them to court, but we believe that the 4 of these guys together committed these murders, that they figured out a way that they went into the store, Jimmy rigged that back door so they could access it then later, and went in the back door, 4 versus 4 teenage boys against 4 teenage girls. They're armed. They have the upper hand, and this is what they did to these poor victims here, set the place on fire, and fled. That was APD's stance, at least by the individuals that decided to charge these guys for many years. And so much so, it was so damn weird, though, because your initial thing that you're investigating is Maurice Pierce is found with a 22. He's walking around the shopping mall. He's an idiot teenager. I can call him that because I was one myself.
Yeah.
I wish it was not too long ago that I was an idiot teenager, but
we're teenagers at heart.
He's walking around the shopping mall with a gun because he's an idiot. He gets caught because he's an idiot. And police, APB, they're like, wait a second. We picked up this kid with a gun, a 22. That matches our caliber of murder weapon. One of the calibers, anyway. And this is just a week later. And the North Cross shopping mall is very close to where the ICBY store is. And they start investigating these two. And Maurice Pierce's story is weird from the beginning because he's like, yeah, I was with my buddy Forrest that night. We were cruising around with some of our other friends, Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott. And when I last saw Forrest, he had the 22 and said he wanted to do something that night with the gun. And then later, he says that Forrest told him that he killed the girls, that he and somebody else, some skinhead guy that he met down at the river, or the creek. There was this creek behind the shop where a lot of these teenage kids would kind of hang out and drink beer, smoke pot, things like that. And that's the story that Maurice Pierce tells to Austin Police Department. They investigated that 8 days after these homicides back in 1991. So the girls were killed on a Friday night, December 6th, 1991. Mm-hmm. They investigate this then and determine that this is all bullshit. They even mic'd up. They put a wire on Maurice trying to get Forrest to repeat saying that stuff to him. And Forrest says, Maurice basically says, like, we're boys. You know I was joking around, right? Like, I didn't kill those girls. I was joking around. I was just saying dumb stuff. And the Austin PD decided then in 1991, these guys weren't worth investigating. And in fact, it's been reported so many different ways that I don't even know what's the truth, but I'll take a stab at it. That 22, the ballistics on that 22 didn't match up with the ballistics for the 22 that they were looking for. And it's been reported that they did match. It's been reported that it didn't match, and it's been reported that at best it was inconclusive. And they tested that multiple times and could never, because what happens is they forget all about these 4 teenage boys until many years later when they have a task force and they're going back and they're starting the case, the investigation all over again. And they see this Maurice Pierce who was picked up for the gun. And even though APD didn't like it in 91, these new detectives decide we're going to pursue this, and they pursue it to the point of they get a confession from Robert Springsteen and a confession from Michael Scott. And because they didn't get a confession from Maurice Pierce and didn't get a confession from Forrest Wellborn, those two guys are never taken to trial. But those are the two guys that led you to the other guys. So that, I mean, you can see it's a shoestring case. And they get a conviction on both of those guys. I think they spent, what, Bill, maybe 8 years in prison, something of that?
They were convicted in 2001, 2002, and then they got out in 2006.
Okay, so they spent years in prison.
Yep.
When they were released, I don't know what it is today, but when they were released, I think it's $80,000 a year that you can receive in damages for being wrongfully convicted in the state of Texas. Now, that's not life-changing money. I wouldn't trade a year in prison for $80,000.
No.
That's just me. That's just me. I like my freedoms, and I like not being surrounded by violent men. So that's just me. Maybe some people would take the payday. I don't know. But so, yeah, look, his DNA, Robert Eugene Brashers, his MO matches, and you had mentioned, casing the joint. I think absolutely. I think you're spot on with that. I think he had to have at least gone into the store that night or prior to that night. And the reason I say that is if you review this guy's criminal history, rape and sexual assault is the motivator for this dude.
Yes.
For every crime he commits, that's the number one reason that he's committing these other crimes. You can say, hey, well, he robbed somebody in every case. Great.
Dave will say that anytime just because if somebody takes a freaking can of Coke, they'll add robbery on.
Exactly. But here we have a guy that is raping at all of these different crime scenes, multiple victims over and over and over again. That is the driving force, the evil driving force behind this man's crimes. He's robbing because he's already there. Why not?
Yeah. Completely.
There are thousands of men that rob and never rape. And this guy was not one of them. So I think he probably saw, and a lot of his victims, a good number of his sexual assault victims, some of them that he then later killed, were younger girls, 12 years old, 14 years old. So if he goes into this yogurt shop and sees two 17-year-old girls working by themselves, that's going to check a lot of boxes for this evil bastard. And he's going to figure out a way to do what it is that he wants to do. And whether he went into the back door later that night or he remained in the shop. See, that's another thing that comes into question here. Is the two guys, right? There's always been the talk of there were two customers left in the store that have never been identified. And that went along with their whole theory that it had to be multiple guys. And that even went along with their theory that the 4 teenage boys did it because 2 of those boys could have sat in the store and then let the other guys in the back after, because the front door was locked. That's not in question. We know that happened, and it should be easy to presume that it was the girls working there that night that locked the door, because we have customers who have been identified, came forward with information that were there just before 11 o'clock, that were leaving and saying, I saw 2 guys. I remember 2 guys still sitting in the store when I left. And the owners and the manager said that typical closing duties would be 10, 15 minutes before 11 to go put the key in the door. So what you do is you use a key to lock the front door from the inside.
Mm-hmm.
Or no, I'm getting this wrong.
And you'd use the key to lock it from... You'd have to lock it from the inside.
Yeah, you lock it from the inside, and then what they do when they leave, they actually leave out the front door, and they then use that same key to lock it from the outside and slide the key back underneath the door. Because look, it's
1991.
It's 1991. Look, and in the late 90s, I worked at a pizza shop, and
probably not even locked.
We had one key for the pizza shop, and we had one of those big brick ovens, Bill, that was so old we never turned it off. We were convinced if we turned it off it would never come back on. So I worked there for 2 years, and that oven was on for 2 years straight.
It's like the light bulb in the San Francisco Fire Department that's been on since 1908 or something like that.
So they had 2 keys. One that would stay with the manager,
sure,
was in charge of opening the store, and then the other that was used to lock the door. So no employee took home a key other than that manager. And the manager the next day would come in, unlock from the front, retrieve the key that was slid back under the front door, and then put it back in its holding spot, its resting place, until the next night that you had to close. He saw these girls. Now the question then becomes, did he see 2 girls, was unaware of the other 2, that maybe they were chilling in the back like we had talked about, and was unaware that there would be 2 additional girls? Or he's such a monster, he may not have cared. He may not have cared. He may have been more intrigued by additional victims. Who knows?
Well, they were younger victims, or they were younger girls. I mean, they were 15 and 13. So, it's... the thing that bugs me is the different calibers of gun, and then the lingering customers that have always been there. They've always been somewhat of the boogeyman, but it was always 2 people. It wasn't ever just one person that was supposedly there. So 2 calibers of gun. All the victims were potentially raped. We know 3 of them were. Nick, am I answering my own question? I mean, doesn't it sound like there's another perpetrator out there?
Well, so to add to this a little bit, let me, I'll pull up some of my notes. And I went through these in one thing we did too. So Robert Springsteen, his alibi for the night in question, that December 6th, 1991. Keep in mind, he's being asked this several years later after the fact when they're reinvestigating and they're looking at him.
A full decade.
Yeah. And they're like, well, what were you doing that night? And he's like, well, I can't say for sure. It was, 10 years ago or whatever. But I believe that I would have been at the Rocky Horror Picture Show that night at the movie theater. And they're like, well, why would you say that? And he's like, because that's what I did every Friday night. And you're telling me this was a Friday night. And what's interesting about Springsteen, too, and I think this is another detail that gets lost in the sauce. He only lived in Austin for like 6 months or 8 months. He lived there a very short period of time. I don't even think he was there a full year. And he was originally from West Virginia and moved back there. And see, when the police department wants these 4 teenage boys who then are adults once they track them down and charge them, they're selling it too. That's why I'm not so quick to buy everything that Austin PD's selling, because they've sold me information in the past and I bought it. I bought it.
Yeah.
And so they go, of course he moved away. He didn't want to stick around. He was worried that he'd get caught. No, we know today he's absolutely 100% innocent. He moved back because that's what some people do. So,
and he was a teenager. It's not like he was making his own choices.
You can see in the docuseries, and I think this was on 48 Hours too, because it wasn't new to me when we saw it in the docuseries, but they show video clips. So the confessions by Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen are all videotaped, because that was a protocol at the time. Would not have been protocol in 1991 when they got Maurice Pierce and other people to talk back then. So it was protocol for Austin PD to videotape all of their questionings, interrogations, whatever you want to call them, at the time that they decided to charge Springsteen and Michael Scott. On the docuseries, you can see the detectives say to Springsteen, well, you're lying. And he goes, what? You know how we know you're lying? The Rocky Horror Picture Show was not showing that night at the movie theater. And so follow me on Twitter at TCGNIC, just like True Crime Garage Nick, at TCGNIC, or follow our show at True Crime Garage on Twitter or Instagram. One thing we posted is from the Austin newspaper. We posted that the Rocky Horror Picture Show on that Friday was absolutely showing at the North Cross 6 movie theater at the North Cross Mall. That night you had Beauty and the Beast. This is going to take you back, Bill. Beauty and the Beast, My Girl. Remember My Girl?
Yeah. Macaulay Culkin.
That's the one that they thought was a kid's show because Macaulay Culkin was in it.
Yeah.
Is it the girl dies?
Macaulay Culkin dies from bee stings. It's terribly tragic.
Yeah. So every kid cries their eyes out thinking that they're like, you sit down with mom and dad thinking you're watching a kid's movie, and then it's like, no, this poor kid died. Anyway, My Girl, Feifel Goes West, For the Boys, I believe that's a Bette Midler deal. Little Man Tate, I think that was Jodie Foster. All I Want for Christmas, which I'm not sure what that was. But here we go. The last one listed, Rocky Horror Picture Show, rated R, midnight for that Friday. That's straight from the Austin American-Statesman newspaper Friday. They came out Friday morning, December 1991. That was something we tweeted out to just show that they were clearly lying on that one. And look, police should be able to lie in their questioning and in their interrogation, but don't tell me that this dude doesn't have an alibi because that movie wasn't showing that night when it was. It absolutely was showing that night. There are people that have a problem with police being allowed to lie during questioning. Here's why I don't have a problem with it. Most of the people that they're questioning are lying to them, so why not level the playing field. But when it comes to this Brasher guy, here's some of the things that we learned at the press conference that took place on this Monday. They talk about the crime a little bit, saying that the perpetrator entered or remained in the store near closing time. So it's clear they still don't have a great grasp of exactly how the killer got into the store. Either he remained in there, as they said, or entered near closing time. The girls were found nude and tied up with their own clothing as ligatures and bindings. That's a detail in here that Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen could not get right during their interrogation, and they would constantly get that wrong. What were they tied up with? Rope? No. And at one point, Michael Scott even says napkins. Like they were tied up with napkins. And finally, one of them guesses that they were tied up with their own clothing. And they're like, that's right. That's right. Think harder. Think harder, Bill. You don't know the answers to this confession to our crime, not because you didn't commit it, but because you're not thinking hard enough. There was evidence of sexual assault. All 4 victims were shot in the head, execution style with the .22. Amy Ayers was also shot with a .380 caliber. The building was set on fire. They collected DNA evidence at the time. All girls had vaginal swabs taken for DNA testing, both at the scene and at the autopsies. This was actually brilliant. This is something that doesn't happen in a lot of cases and should happen in a lot of cases. Do all your collecting that you can at the scene, and also do all the collecting you can at the autopsies. It never hurts to have too much evidence. The one fired .380 cartridge casing was located in a floor drain. So they found that casing there. There was no casings for the .22. And the manner of the fire and the manner in which the fire was extinguished made evidence collection extremely difficult. Of course it did. And then there were thousands of tips and dozens of confessions, but most led nowhere. Now that's with the exception of the Maurice Pierce, Forrest Wellborn, Robert Springsteen, and Michael Scott. Another sad part of this story, too, is that Maurice Pierce he's dead. He's since passed away. He died in a struggle with a police officer. Maurice Pierce certainly was no saint, but you also have to wonder how much this played into his mental state, especially regarding law enforcement and the authorities. I mean, they wanted to try him for a quadruple homicide. They threatened to try him. They tried 2 of his friends and convicted them. And you have to wonder how does that break a man? And how's he going to respond when he's pulled over? Yeah. And in fact, a lot of these attorneys that represented these told them, get out of the state of Texas, because they're not going to leave you alone here. You will be constantly watched, and they will pull you over and harass you every chance that they get. And that's because what this case did to Austin, what it did to the state of Texas. And it's understandable. And look, as much as I can fault these guys too for handling it badly and convicting 2 of the wrong guys, I can also understand that when you are that passionate, that driven to solve a case and get justice for children, raped and murdered children, when you have someone sitting across from you, regardless of how you got to that, when they're telling you that they did it, it's really difficult. It's got to be so difficult, Bill, to just go, oh, well, I don't believe him.
Yeah. Any of these officers who, take a confession or do this or do that, I mean, it's sometimes we can always, not always, I mean, sometimes, I didn't mean to throw always in there. Sometimes we can blame the officers for the way that they coerced them and the interrogation method that they used and blah, 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 like the Central Park 5, perfect example. But yeah, once you're told somebody, you tell the police or you tell anybody that you've committed a crime, it's like, how the hell do you get yourself out of this? And you've seen that for many years, and all sorts of false confessions, and I'm right back with you on. I don't know if I should be believing everything that the APD is saying at the moment, because you've just basically given me all the reasons not to. I mean, at least it gives me question onto what else could still be there. Like, are they just going to do the Atlanta child murders tactic and just close the door on everybody and just say that there's no other, that's the guy, it was one guy? Are they going to come up with
according to the
theory?
press conference that I watched on Monday with the current detective and the APD, they said on Monday that it was Brashers, and it was Brashers by himself, and that he alone perpetrated this horrific crime, and it does line up with his MO on some other crimes where he
yes,
multiple victims in other crimes, and he carried those out by himself, and they also point to that in some of his other crimes he had multiple weapons.
Okay, so that answers some of my question, because that's my biggest hang-up is the different caliber weapons. I mean, who's walking around with 2 different handguns? I mean, but it is Texas. It's a guy who's obviously got ulterior motives than just self-protection.
And he would have drove to this area, so he wasn't from this area when these crimes were committed.
So I guess let me ask you the question then. So was he just literally passing through, or was he just getting a cup of coffee in Austin for a month or so?
Well, and I hate to give praise to somebody so evil, but to put it short and not sweet at all, this guy was a serial killer, serial rapist, and he was very good at it. Unfortunately, he was very good at it, and it appears to me that he would travel. So he worked as a handyman or a carpenter. So he worked for himself a lot, a contractor, and from my understanding, he would be gone. He had a family. Here's another guy. He had a wife and several kids, and he would be gone for weeks at a time, they say. And so I think what he was doing is that he had this drive to kill, and he probably studied how some of these serial killers get away with it or have longevity in their career, if you want to call it that, their killing careers. And I believe that he was putting distance between his home life and his crimes and his murders by way of miles. And he's driving to other states and committing these horrible crimes. So he was born. This is what we know about him today. Robert Eugene Brashers was born in 1958 in Newport News, Virginia. And the reason why some things are still in question about this guy and will remain so is that he died at the age of 40, January 19th, 1999, when police he was living in a motel with his wife and kids at the time. And this was in
this is when he got caught?
Yeah. So he was living in Kennett,
January 13th.
Yeah, he's living in Kennett, Missouri, in this motel. Police knock on the door because there's a stolen vehicle out front, and he's hiding under the bed. And after a long standoff, he took his own life. He shot himself. Yeah, and it's my understanding.
But he let his family go.
He let his family go. It's my understanding that the gun that he shot himself with was the 380. I've seen that reported once or twice. I don't want to say that that's hardcore fact, but this 380 comes into play a lot with this guy because they are saying that there's another crime that they're convinced that he is the killer, and that same 380 was used in that crime, which was a similar crime. So
is that one not known? Or they not named that one? Or
it's interesting because in the press conference they thanked several different agencies. They thanked the Greenville, South Carolina Police Department. They thanked DNA International Labs. And among the people and agencies and outfits that they were thanking, one of them was they just said a not to be named Kentucky Police Department. Wait, their exact words were, and thank you to the Kentucky Police Department that cannot be named. So what's going on here, Bill, is there's another crime that they think he committed, but Kentucky Police Department has not come out yet naming Brashers, has not came out and did their press conference yet. And so out of fairness to them, they're not naming that agency.
Just lit the fire of every web sleuth out there.
Well, I'll tell you what I think case it is. And I've had a lot of interaction with people in the last 3 or 4 days. So a lot of information coming from a lot of different people and different sources here. But let's talk about him, Brashers, real quick, and then we'll get into some other stuff. So he was first arrested in Port St. Lucie, Florida, for assaulting a 24-year-old woman. And according to investigators, he was very violent. It appears that he was going to abduct and sexually assault this woman. He gets caught for this, and he gets locked up. And as you said, I've seen it reported he was supposed to get 10 years. I've seen 11. I've seen 12. But we know he only served about 3.5 years of that sentence. And as you said, another unfortunate part of this story is that this Austin yogurt shop murders would never have happened had he had to complete that sentence, the full length of that sentence. Now, what would have still happened, you know this, Bill, by looking at this guy's, what we know he's responsible. He would have killed somebody anyway.
Yeah,
when he got somebody somewhere.
Been in this case, but
a woman or a girl somewhere. Now, I'll just, without going through all the crimes and details, I'll just list so his convictions while he was alive: Florida, attempted first-degree murder, aggravated battery, using a firearm during the commission of a crime. Georgia, convicted of grand theft auto, impersonating a police officer. We'll circle back to that one. And he got 12 years. You're right. This report says 12 years in Florida, and for the Georgia crimes, 5 years. Now, it wasn't until after his death that they linked him to a cold case murder.
A long time, too. Like 19 years they waited before they tested his DNA.
2018, right?
Yeah.
They get a hit in South Carolina, Greenville, South Carolina, and they figure out, oh, well, he raped and murdered this young woman, and we were unable to solve the case for all these years. And it looks to me, Bill, like he lived in a different state and would just go off on these trips. Like it's almost
Memphis, Tennessee. Yeah, very Israel Keys. Exactly what I was thinking earlier before, and I was just searching my brain for the name. But I mean, South Carolina, Florida, Missouri, again, South Carolina, Memphis, Tennessee, and potentially Kentucky. Like, that's crazy. Like, I think he definitely was Israel Keys before Israel Keys. And helped him get away with it for a long time, too.
Yeah. 7+ murders. We're probably going to find out about more. And if we can't get it through the DNA, I would be curious about the ballistics, if they could link this 380 to some murders in other states. Because, as said, he seemed to disappear for periods of time. And as you said, we already know Florida, Missouri, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and suspected Kentucky now, multiple states. If I could, I want to, this is really good, because I hate when we find out about these cold cases. One is finally solved. It's a guy that was never suspected. His name wasn't in the police file, but we know it's him because of the DNA. But then we can never figure out making a connection from the perpetrator to the victim or the victim to the perpetrator. It's always a mystery, right? And then there's something unsatisfying about that, where you're like, okay, well, we got the guy, but it doesn't. You want to be able to draw a red string from victim to perpetrator to victim, right? How did they cross paths? How did they know one another? Or how did the perpetrator find the victim? And a lot of times we don't get that situation. But the evidence against this guy, they determined that the .380 cartridge ballistically matched other crimes that he committed. Now, the interesting thing here is they knew that the ballistics report stated that in all probability, the weapon used was limited to an AMT backup model 380 semi-automatic handgun in the murder of Amy Ayers. So while originally the 380, the use of two different guns, was holdback information that eventually leaked its way out. And part of that, too, in fairness to Austin PD, when something goes to trial, there's no way for it not to get leaked out. It's part of the discovery, right? It's going to be... And it is, yes. Speaking of discovery, in 2011, I believe it was the defense that said, is the ones that put out the information that it was two different DNA profiles of the killers, and none of them matched Springsteen, Michael Scott, Maurice Pierce, or Forrest Wilborn. None of those two profiles didn't match any of those four guys. That information came out by the defense. There's people out there that will say, Nick, don't be so quick to believe that because it came from defense attorneys. I say the problem with that, your opinion on that, is that the defense is working off of the same discovery evidence that the prosecution is working off of. So it's not like they're sitting there and they have different evidence. It's their interpretation of that evidence that may come into question. Now, the holdback that worked on this was that they knew they had a good idea of specific information about this 380, that it was an AMT backup model 380. And it was only once they started connecting this 380 to other crimes that they figured out, oh, we got to test this DNA and we got to test it. Because from my understanding, remember, we talked about the problems they had with the YSTR DNA. And of course, DNA has advanced. But remember, was it 2020 that you and I were having the discussion about the FBI wouldn't... They had a match in the yogurt shop case. And remember, the FBI wouldn't release the information. And now going back and looking at that, as angry as I was at the time, I think I have a better understanding of it today than I did then. What I think that the FBI was trying to say is because these people submitted their DNA anonymously, and it was private records, that they couldn't release that information. I was angry about it then because of the way that they stated that. Looking at it now, what I think happened, Bill, was I don't think that it told them specifically who it matched. I think they said it doesn't exclude these 1,000 people or these 2,000 people. I think that was more of what they were dealing with, and that would make sense as to why they wouldn't give out that information, because, yes, your guy is in here somewhere, but it's in this large batch of people. We don't know which one specifically that it is. That's my guess, but that would make some sense as to why they handled it differently in 2020. Eventually, this matches DNA here, but they were able to put Robert Eugene Brashers in the general area at the general time. And that was really intriguing. So he gets pulled over by Border Patrol. And this would have been within 2 days of the yogurt shop murders. And let me see if I can find this information to make sure that I'm not speaking out of turn here. Okay, yeah. So the murders took place December 6, 1991. Yep. And this is from the city of Austin. That says less than 48 hours after the yogurt shop murders, Brashers is stopped by Border Patrol at a westbound checkpoint between the cities of El Paso, Texas, and Las Cruces, which is New Mexico. Brashers was driving a stolen car out of Georgia. So this is the conviction that he gets in Georgia. He gets convicted of this stolen car that's in his possession. During that stop, they find in his possession a .380 pistol. All right, they confiscate that. They make record of it. It's an AMT .380 backup model pistol. So it matches what they've come up with as the make and model in their .380 that was used at Yogurt Shop. And they even put the serial number here as A75213. This is the same make and model identified by ballistics as the weapon used in Yogurt Shop. Brashers was charged with auto theft and felony possession of a firearm, or a felon in possession of a firearm. The gun was later released to Brasher's father after Brashers was sentenced. So Robert Brashers really wanted to get that gun back. And then it says Brasher's YSTR profile has been found in the following 3 yogurt shop profiles: sexual assault kits from the Harbison sisters and Amy Ayers.
Yeah.
But, okay, so I wanted to do this. This is something that we weren't able to do on True Crime Garage. I wanted to, as I said, there's been a lot of folks reaching out to me in the past few days. And if you will allow me, Bill, I want to go through some of these.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so a quick shout out here. First, a couple shout outs to some folks in Austin, in the great city of Austin. Bill and I have been to Austin. We've been to Austin together, right? Did you go to Austin?
No, actually, it wasn't at Austin Crime Con.
I went to Austin Crime Con. Austin was a great city, fun city. So shout out to a couple folks in Austin, Jeff, Julie, and Reese, who independently of one another each sent me email about this case. And give a shout out to persons in parts unknown. We have Brittany, Blanca, Ryan, and Ted. And more specifically, I thought, I'll just read these and we'll kind of talk through them here. So it says, "Hi, Nick and Captain. So I listened to your podcast last night about the yogurt shop murders being solved, but I do have some questions. Does this Brashers guy match the description of the man who was talking to the security guy?" Okay. Bill, you may remember there was a gentleman who owned a security company. He was a customer at the yogurt shop that night. And later, after the murders, he told police there was this strange guy who went into the back part of the shop while I was there. He asked to use the restroom, and the restrooms were located in the back of the shop. And so he went to the back of the shop. And the security owner is telling police, like, I'm hypervigilant, I'm extra observant, it's my nature, it's my business, and gives a description of this guy. Now, I'm uncertain, I can't say with any great level of certainty if he would have matched this description. One thing we need to point out about Brashers is his look changed over the years, so I don't know exactly how he looked in 1991, specifically that Friday night in December. But I will say this, he would have been considerably older than the man that was described by the security company owner that night.
He would have been 33 or 32.
Yeah, he would have been. Brashers would have been in his early 30s, and the security company guy was describing somebody in their late teens, maybe 21, 22 at the oldest. So I would say that he may not. But I love this question. Here's why I love this question. Because, and I've said this on True Crime Garage, the only 2 people that were not identified that night that were in the store, that we know were in the store, or at least according to eyewitnesses, were the 2 men that were still in the store when the shop closed. That can't be true because this guy spotted by the security guy has never been identified either. So now we're up to 3 people that haven't been identified. It says that they continue on. Who was the other guy sitting in the booth? So these would be the 2 guys that eyewitnesses said. So it makes sense that there would be 2 guys because there were 2 chairs that were not placed up on the tables. However, I will also say this. If there's a single person sitting at the table, you're not going to come by and put up any of the chairs at the table. I wonder now if Brashers did do this by himself, Bill, if that was detectives talking witnesses into misremembering and seeing another person, because they were so hung up on the use of 2 guns that it had to be at least 2 guys.
Like I was.
Yeah. And you should be. And so what if witnesses get, and there was a man still in the store when I left. He was sitting over there and they go, "You sure it wasn't 2 guys?" And now it becomes 2 guys. And maybe it was only Brashers that was still sitting in there and people were misremembering because police were so hung up on the idea of 2 guns, 2 perpetrators, and 4 victims, 2 perpetrators. The math is easier to
suspect that it's going to be the work of two individuals opposed to one, and that's not hard to put two and two together. Could he do it himself? Yeah, of course he can, because he's got if he's got two guns. I don't know. I mean, he was definitely, there's no doubt in my mind that he's involved and did this crime. Questions remain on whether or not other people may have been involved. But
we need answers on what's up with the other DNA profile and what's up with the second gun, because this is what this emailer is asking.
Because 22 is still gun? The 22 is still gone. It's not been found. And when you look at the other case, when they initially put Scott and Springsteen in jail, they found the 22 that they thought was the 22, but then they mentioned in the article, in the Austin Statesman from like 2000, but the 380 has never been found. And so it's like, okay. And then now we've flipped the table and now it's 2025 and they had the 380 back in the day,
Well, and here's the thing. Again, Austin PD, the current detective, I believe his name is Jackson, Detective Jackson. Kudos to him for getting this thing to where it is. I'm not trying to take anything away from him.
Hell yeah, 30 plus years. Jeez.
Yes, thank God somebody was still working it, and he was doing a hell of a job. He did a hell of a job on this. So, but again, selling me the idea that this crime has a similar MO to other Brasher crimes that he committed by himself, used multiple weapons. Along that same lines, though, we need to keep in mind that when he's pulled over less than 48 hours after the murders, he is in possession of only one of the guns. He does not have both of the guns. So if you want to talk about MO, well, his MO, which is his MO? Is it to get rid of the murder weapon or to keep the murder weapon? Because it appears that if he did it by himself, he got rid of one murder weapon and kept the other.
I was just going to say, that makes absolutely no sense. It's like, I'm going to get... that makes no sense. Makes no sense.
Why won't the FBI release the DNA information they have? I'm not convinced this is completely solved. And that's kind of where I sit, just like this emailer. I want a little more information. I think that they... Again, I'm not going to repeat this one more time. I know I've said it 20 times already. Brashers is the guy. That's not what we're questioning here. We just want to know if there's more to this story and if there should be somebody else that could be held accountable, somebody that may still be alive. And then this emailer goes on to say, my sister and I both enjoy your podcast very much. Thank you. Holly is her name. Thank you, Holly, for the kind words. And says, we both still have Kenneth McDuff in the back of our brains. That Kenneth McDuff is somebody that we addressed on True Crime Garage the first time we covered it in 2017. Beverly Lowery touches on him a little bit in her book because he did abduct a woman in Austin very shortly from a car wash shortly after the yogurt shop case. And Kenneth McDuff is absolutely evil as can be. In fact, he's the first serial killer that I recall being referred to as monster. It's tattooed on my brain, Bill. Texas Monthly, great publication.
Your favorite.
My favorite. Texas Monthly did a long form story on Kenneth McDuff. And on the cover of that month's magazine, it's a picture of a close-up of Kenneth McDuff, black and white picture, and it just says monster across the top. And that's the first time, these guys should always be referred to as monsters. It probably wasn't the first time that was used, but it was the first time that I remember it being done so cleverly. And
well, what's disturbing about that cover also is that
it's haunting, isn't it?
Right, and then below it says, why Texas paroled vicious killer Kenneth McDuff.
He killed 3 people, and then they were like, well, we'll let you out. We'll let you out.
And then he went to kill, didn't he go on to kill more?
Yeah, when he got out, he killed a bunch of, at least 4 more women that we are aware of, maybe more than that. But with McDuff, the reason why I never thought that it was him, again, this goes back to M.O. Rape was a big part of his crimes too. But in every crime, when he would abduct the woman and move them and take them elsewhere. And because torture might have been a bigger motivator for him than the rape, because he would move the victim to a location where he would have time and privacy, and he would assault them and torture them, and prolonged torture in many of these. And so I had always thought that it couldn't be Macduff. He's certainly capable of such horrific evil acts. That's not in question. He always would move the victim to another location, and that we know was not done in Yogurt Shop. So shout out to Holly for the email. I got another one, if you allow me here, Bill. This one is going to give a little insight or a little bit of homework for myself and for the people listening to your great show. It says, I figured you guys may do another episode after the incredible update on the Yogurt Shop murders, since you've covered this case spanning years now and have done an exceptional job, I might add. I wanted to give you a heads up in case you weren't aware. There is an episode of the Investigation Discovery show called Evil Lives Here, featuring Robert Brasher's daughter, Deborah Brashers. This is from a few years ago, but I thought her story could possibly provide some insight into him for, or if and when you guys do another episode to wrap up your coverage on the Yogurt Shop murder case. And he says, this is from Mike, shout out to Mike. He says, some interesting things she detailed in the episode. That Brashers would travel for work and had his own construction company, and he'd often be away from home for days or even weeks at a time. He would obsessively watch the news and look for updates on crimes he committed. She says she knows that now in hindsight. He would wear disguises, sometimes to avoid detection and to disguise his appearance, wearing things like wigs, shades, etc. He got violent only a few times with his family, but that was uncommon. Also, his last name is apparently pronounced Brashears and not Brashers. That's interesting.
Possible.
And it says, anyway, nothing in the episode is some epic revelation. However, I'm always interested in as much context and information as possible whenever killers of cases I've been following over the years are finally revealed. Seeing the pain and guilt Deborah Brashers has over her father's crimes was heartbreaking to see, and I'm sure when she found out about this, it's going to devastate her. Yeah, very weird. He commits suicide in 1999. Not discovered that he's this serial killer rapist until 2018, and now in 2025, he's the perpetrator of one of the most horrific crime maybe in Austin city history.
Or in American history, as far as unsolved crimes go and manners of death. I mean, 4 girls that are all under the age of 17 and under, and small town. I mean, that impacts ripple effects. I mean, the families, the amount of people impacted by that particular case. I mean, the one thing about these cases, when you do get some sort of resolution, is that it's like, it's good news, but it's bad news because the guy's freaking dead.
Yeah.
You know, and he basically, you know, he should have never been out of jail. Like,
so when they catch him with remember we said that we went through his crimes that he was convicted of?
Uh-huh.
So one of the crimes that he's convicted of, impersonating a police officer, he had showed up to this woman's home or apartment, and we now know why he was there, right? They don't know at the time. We now know why he was there. But he gets busted in the process. And he brought with him not only a firearm and a kill kit, let's call it, for lack of a better term. He brought with him a video camera. So whatever he was going to do, he was going to videotape it. Those are the worst kind. You see a sexual sadist like that, and they're documenting their crimes. Those are the worst.
Those are the worst, because you know there's so many more out there. Like there's no way in hell that this guy, equipped with a video camera, all the tools for a robbery and a sexual assault, has not done this before. There are tapes somewhere.
He had a cop light for his vehicle, and he had either a fake badge or some kind of uniform looking outfit. So he was going to impersonate, probably pull over women on the road as well. And so here's another one I received. This one is from our friends Anya and Kevin over at the Murder Sheet podcast, who do such a great job with everything. Right. It says, hope you're doing well. Sending you some info. We're working on the yogurt shop murders. I'm almost certain that this is the mysterious 1998 Kentucky cold case alluded to at the yogurt shop murders press conference on Monday. And Anya says, I could be wrong, but it fits. And the MO certainly fits. And this is, regardless, like she said on the show, even if this is not the case they're talking about, this is still an unsolved case, which deserves some attention.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the whole point of doing most of these shows.
So the Murder Sheet people are pointing to this is November 6, 1998. Somebody murdered 43-year-old Linda Rutledge. She was killed in her parents' business, the Nixon Hearing Aid Center, shot multiple times. The building was set on fire. So somebody goes into a business with a firearm, kills the person working there, sets the building on fire. This would line up, and we do know that it was a Kentucky cold case that Austin PD cited. They wouldn't say where it took place, but they did kind of slip up because the detective says, I'm not even going to say the year that it took place, but the slideshow, it said the year on the graphic on the slideshow. So 1998 was kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
They continue to leak things out. And then it says, Murder Sheet folks say, we found out that Brashers wasn't the only killer in his family. His older brother murdered a state trooper. Now that I've not dug into that.
Yeah, I've not heard that one, but that's very possible. Geez. That's crazy. But it's not that we're keyboard warriors right now looking this up. And this is great podcasting.
Well, we'll cut this part. The dead air. We'll cut this part out.
I do not see that he had anybody kill anybody else.
Well, we can sort that out later, but
according to the latest of ChatGPT.
Yeah. So
his brother died in 1979.
I do want to give a shout out to my friend Fig Solves. He has a channel on YouTube. Check out Fig Solves. He and I and the captain became friends during the Delphi case back when they were still looking for the perpetrator of the Delphi murders. And so we've had many conversations on several different cases, and I was lucky enough to be a guest on his show a couple of times. Most recently, we talked about the still unsolved Dardine family murders. That one is a head scratcher for sure. But so he sends me a text saying, if the yogurt shop murders was truly committed by one individual, it will really hurt my brain. And my reply was, it's not impossible, but I'm having a rough time accepting that APD has a really poor record with this one. Brashers makes sense. Yogurt shop was more about rape than robbery, but the discovery shared with the defense said 2 DNA profiles. APD played up the multiple assailants when it benefited their case. Now they downplay it when it does not. His reply, Fig's reply, exactly. I thought there was 2 DNA profiles of significance. Yeah, they have the right guy, but I feel misled by APD too. Maybe they were doing all this to try and save face for the wrongful convictions. No idea, but 2 different weapons used. But 2 different weapons used to men who were there late, never identified, and then 2 DNA samples, and they're like, yeah, it's one guy. Brashers was a freaking monster. And then I pointed out the 22 was never found. Mm-hmm. So he kept the 380. If he were solo, why wouldn't he keep both weapons, just like you and I had touched on? And then I went on to further speculate maybe the 22 was always going to be a ditch weapon. Maybe this 380 holds some kind of special place in his heart and mind for some reason. And the 22 was going to be, I'll use this in the commission. Didn't plan on pulling the second gun, which was only used once at Yogurt Shop. 22 was used 4 times. This one's used once. Maybe he didn't plan on using it, and the 22 was always going to be a ditch weapon, because that is something that we do need to strongly consider here, and that would explain why he's found with only one of the murder weapons, because what we see, a part of his MO is he's driving around in a stolen vehicle. So this goes back to him being very good at doing these horrible things. Bill, he's going to far distance away from where he lives, from his home life, his family life, and he's killing out on the road. So he's not likely to be tied to it unless he's caught in that area at the time. And then I think that he's showing up to these cities, showing up to these crime scenes in a stolen vehicle. And we see that multiple times. And we know that Border Patrol pulled him over. He's driving a vehicle that was stolen in the state of Georgia.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So maybe he did have a ditch weapon.
Yeah. I mean, from everything for what we're taking, if we wanted to take everything at face value of what they've said so far, then yes, then it sounds like that potentially is the situation where he did have an extra weapon, to commit the actual crime, but maybe he got thrown off, or maybe that gun jammed and he had to use his 380. Because there's always that possibility, guns are only as reliable,
Other thing, though, too, that's troubling, there were some things missing from the murder scene. Personal items that belonged to the girls. When they pulled him over within 48 hours, those items, if they were found, they weren't cataloged, or at least not told to us by Austin PD in their press conference on Monday. So one of the girls had a leather jacket, like a bomber-style jacket. That jacket was missing from the crime scene, and there were some other personal items we don't need to get into. But speaking of personal items, one detail, I don't know why this is, but when you review these cases, there's always some small little detail that seems insignificant, but also really hits me hard for some reason. And one of the girls had a ring from her boyfriend. I mean, this is teenage love, right? This is teenagers. Mm-hmm. We've all been there. One of them had their boyfriend had gifted them a ring, and the girls were forced to strip. So they know this based off of the state of the clothing when it's found. It wasn't torn, it wasn't ripped, it wasn't pulled off of them. So you can presume that they were forced to strip. And some of the clothes was even found neat, placed down neatly. And right. And I believe some of it was folded up. The girl, and I can't forgive me, Bill, because I can't remember which girl it was. And I have a hard time saying their names, too, when we talk about certain details, because it's just so sad.
No,
these were, from everything we've seen, these were great kids, too. These were really smart, popular girls, nice girls. And one of them, that ring was found at the scene because she had placed it when she was ordered to strip. She placed it, tucked it between 2 articles of her clothing when she placed the clothing on the floor of the back portion of that store. And what that tells me, Bill, is that at that moment when she chose to do that, she thought, she doesn't know that she's going to be killed yet. She doesn't know that she's going to be murdered. In fact, she did that probably because what the 4 of them were most likely all thinking, this is just going to be a robbery. This guy with the gun is just going to take the money from the register. He's going to take anything of value that he sees, and I'm going to hide this ring, this prized possession that I have that was given to me by my boyfriend. I'm going to hide it so, yeah, he can get out of here with all the money and everything else that he wants to take, but he's not going to take this one keepsake from me. And it's sad. This fucking coward takes his life. He doesn't get punished for the most horrific crimes that he committed while he was here, and then leaves us also wondering, what else did he do?
Right. I certainly wouldn't be closing the book on this guy. I'd be combing every case across the country, because this guy didn't really have much trouble with doing what we consider the most horrific acts a human can do to another human. And I mean, he did it time and time again. And it's just to not, yeah, he served some time for a couple of his crimes. Some time is the key words there. But the fact that he was able to kill himself and not face the consequences of all these other horrible crimes that he committed that's the one thing that sucks. I mean, I love the fact that they've got an answer. Some of these families can grieve differently and, find some resolution. But boy, that, yeah, they had this guy dead to rights. If they would have just kept him in prison, and the case would never have happened. But he would have eventually gotten out and done the same thing to somebody else. So it's just...
And I'm curious if Austin PD will update their statement. We do know that this is a statement that came out before the press conference. And again, at the press conference, we're being told that Robert Eugene Brashers is the sole perpetrator of this horrific case. But their official statement that was released on the day that the news broke, which would have been last Friday. This is from the Austin Police Department's website. And it says, Austin police make significant breakthrough in 1991. I can't believe it's yogurt murder case. Austin police have made a significant breakthrough in this case and have new information. Our team never gave up working this case for almost 34 years. They have worked tirelessly and remain committed to solving this case for the families of Jennifer Harbison, Sarah Harbison, Eliza Thomas, and Amy Ayers, all innocent lives taken senselessly and far too soon. We have identified a suspect in these murders through a wide range of DNA testing. The suspect is Robert Eugene Brashers, who committed suicide in 1999. This remains an open and ongoing investigation.
Well, that's good. That's good. I mean, again, this guy is obviously connected to other crimes, and my nature. I'm always like, okay, when did this guy get out of jail? Was he by chance in Bay Village in 1989? But of
course.
Like, it's just one of those things that make you question. But
well, and you see that this takes place, a quadruple homicide, and he traveled a good distance to commit this, from my understanding. Then when you see a case this horrific, this tragic, it's limitless what this guy is capable of. And if he's willing to go to great distances, great lengths, great efforts to commit these types of crimes, it leaves everything on the table for when this guy was out and walking around a free man.
Yeah, it's not like it's not like Gilgo, where Lisk, where we have an area, a geographic area that he frequented, or Colonial Parkway murders, or some of these other cases where it's geography related because of where they live. This lines up more with, like, say, the Golden State Killer, who would travel long distances to commit his crimes. Israel Keys is the most prescient one, I would think, would match up to this kind of guy. But I mean, this was a guy who was committing crimes across the entire United States: Florida, Tennessee, Kentucky, Texas. How far west did he get? Those are questions that we still don't know yet.
It gives hope to other cases, though.
It does. I would hope that all of the people in these states across the country that have something that lines up maybe time-wise, they've got to look at this guy.
And it gives hope to cases that weren't committed by this guy, too. 33, almost 34 years.
Exactly. I mean, that's what my mom said. She's like, can you believe it's been... And I'm like, it's what we need with the Amy Mahalovic cases. Something, and these cases, we've talked about it. We talked about it at CrimeCon, Othram. They do an amazing job. It's these labs that just are incredible at doing this work that was once not even a possibility. And now we're solving crimes that once felt absolutely hopeless. I mean, when we talked about this originally, I don't think we ever thought that we would get a break. I mean, it had been so long, and
yes and no.
There's always the hope.
I went back and forth on that. There was information coming out that didn't allow me to be so hopeful, but there was Beverly Lowry's book that did. It did leave the light on for me that there was a chance with this one. And I'll say this too. Austin PD and the current detective and the brass over there,
Jackson.
All the credit in the world, all the kudos in the world to you guys and girls over there. Thank you for all of your hard work and continuing this case for so many years. But also, I want to say thank you. We thanked Beverly Lowry. I think we kind of need to thank HBO as well, because if you look at this case and where we got to where we are today,
sure,
the majority of the ballistics work and the majority of the DNA work, the ballistics work and DNA work that led us to Robert Eugene Brashers, whatever, how we're going to say his name.
Brashers.
What led us to him has all been conducted within the last calendar year. Okay. What was going on in the last calendar year? They were filming the docuseries that came from this book. So I think some thank you needs to go to them, because they did what the late, great Lou Smith said, one of my favorite detectives of all time. Lou Smith said that once a year he would take a new look, a fresh look at every one of his unsolved cases, if not for any other reason, just to stir the pot. And because I tell you what, you shake some trees, Bill, you never know what's going to fall out of there. You never know what's going to fall. Thank you to all the great folks over at Wild Blue Press. Go and check out your next great true crime read by going to wildbluepress.com. And also, a big thank you to my dear friend Bill Huffman. It was great to see him at this year's CrimeCon, and it was great to catch up with him here today on True Crime Talk. Please like and subscribe to our show so we can keep bringing to you more great true crime talk. And go check out Bill Huffman's show, Who Killed, available everywhere that you get great podcasts. Thanks for listening.